we have heard some really exciting solutions this morning that will help us transform our food and agriculture systems, but we know that no single organization and no single sector can do this alone. We just heard that. So that's why I'm excited to turn to our next conversation on the power of partnerships to understand how food and agriculture companies can support the nonprofit community. So please welcome back John Piotti of American Farmland Trust. We're also joined by Amanda Leland, the Executive Director of the Environmental Defense Fund. Round of applause. And we have Jeff Tkach, the CEO of the Rodale Institute. Round of applause. I'm such a fan of everyone on this panel, so I'm thrilled to sit here with you. Amanda, you need to know that EDF gave me my first internship ever 1,000,000 years ago, so I wouldn't be here without you. So thank you.
I love stories like that. Thank you.
You know, me too. So I need each of you, if you can, to just give a very brief, and you know how many minutes we have, look at this clock, a very brief overview of the work that each of you do, and explain why it's so important to have a holistic approach, combining environment, energy, farmers, the protection of farmland. Jeff.
Great. Thank you, Danny. It's an honor to be here today. Rodale Institute is widely known as the global leader in regenerative organic agriculture. So our founder, J.I. Rodale, in 1942 said that healthy soil equals healthy food equals healthy people. And that's been our guiding principle for over 7 decades. So we're putting the science to substantiate the benefits of organic agriculture and comparing those systems to conventional over the long term. Rodale is really providing the necessary research, education, and technical assistance, which was just mentioned a moment ago, and filling a massive void that our land grant system is creating for farmers in this country. In many ways, we're helping farmers where that system has left off and not provided the necessary support.
Yeah. Amanda?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you again for having us.
I'm so thrilled you're here.
What a great session this morning. So EDF is an environmental organization, and we focus on practical solutions that will last. And we work in what I often call the messy middle. The messy middle is where agendas may not always align, but where real work gets done when you collaborate. And our work in agriculture and food spans the ecosystem. We work with big food and ag companies. We work with farmers and ranchers and other food producers like fishermen. And we work with policymakers and our NGO partners. So it takes a village to get real work done.
And you really have to span across all of these sectors to do it well.
You really do, and you have to have smart data and science, and you have to be thoughtful, and you have to think about how solutions are going to land and how they're going to help improve people's lives.
Again, intentionality is key here.
100%.
John, we've been hearing all morning about this need for a farmer-centric approach, and I just want to hear from you why you think that's so important. I mean, it's so embedded into what AFT does.
Well, thanks, Danny. You're absolutely right. Sometimes we say it begins with the land, but it doesn't matter if you don't have the stewards on that land doing the work. And what I found in my 40 years in this field is if you start with the farmers, if you think about their needs and work backwards, you often get to the best results. AFT, like Rodale and EDF, really do take sort of a systems approach to this, which is wonderful. And like EDF, we partner a lot on policy work. We sort of operate in that middle space.
Yeah.
The difference is they're doing it in a whole range of environmental issues, and we're doing it in one particular area where agriculture comes into play. But that's so important, both to think holistically, think of the system, focus, when you're talking about agriculture, focus on the farmer, and then also operate on practical, real-world solutions, bring science into it. You heard the word science from all three of us. How rare is that nowadays, right? Let's focus on what works.
It shouldn't be rare, should it? Oh, God, where are we at? Jeff, we've heard a lot from companies today, and I want to talk about Rodale's approach to helping the private sector encourage transition to more regenerative or organic practices.
Great. Rodale started a technical assistance arm 4.5 years ago in partnership with our Pennsylvania State Department of Agriculture. So we now have it's the first program in the nation that is giving any farmer in our state free access to technical assistance, which essentially means that the experts at Rodale hold the hand of any farmer that raises their hand and says, I want to transition even a portion of my land to organic and regenerative production. So we're now working with over 175 farms and farm businesses in 4 years that are moving their farm in that direction. Two other quick examples. General Mills recently hired Rodale to work with all the farmers in their supply shed around wheat, oats, and tomatoes. And so we're, again, providing technical assistance to their growers in the Midwest in California. And the third example was announced last week. Our partners via Patagonia and the Holdfast Collective just funded Rodale's ability to offer technical assistance in one county, Ventura County, California, which is one of the hotbeds of chemical farming. So we're going to be working with farmers in that county to move them towards a regenerative organic approach.
Again, alliances, partnerships, all of those things that we've been hearing this morning. John, I want to turn back to you and talk about the transformation the transformation we've been talking about, but you need to encourage sort of enrollment in regenerative programs, and why is that so important?
I'm sorry, you asking me?
Yes, John. Yes.
Well, it's critically important. We talked about all the money that Congress has provided through the Inflation Reduction Act. But if that money doesn't get used well on the land, two things are going to happen. One, we're not going to get the benefits, but we're also not going to have the ongoing political support to make that happen. And it is a challenge for farmers, particularly small and medium-sized farmers, to take advantage of some of those programs. You know, USDA is well-meaning at times, but believe me, some of the application processes, they are Byzantine at best, right? So there's two issues, the complexity, but also just the capacity of USDA. With so much more money, and to be honest, a staff that was cut pretty heavily during the last administration, they're having trouble getting those dollars out. AFT is actually playing a big role with that. In 31 states this next year, we'll have boots on the ground doing outreach, helping farmers complete conservation plans for natural resource conservation services, and helping them go through the application process.
I'm interested also in hearing how you partner with other nonprofits and NGOs.
Well, I think we all do. We have to do, right? This is the only way to make it work. The distinction that I'll make, or the additive, is that because we're about, we do a lot of work in the farmland protection space, as you've heard today. We partner with a lot of relatively small land trusts and conservation organizations across the country, and we also work quite actively with state departments of agriculture, because frequently they're running farmland protection programs. In 29 states, we had a direct hand in creating those programs. So like Rodale and like EDF, we partner everywhere with other NGOs, with business community, but for us, we also dive in with state government and with very small nonprofits.
John, I want to ask, and you can answer it briefly, when you're partnering with other nonprofits, you're also competing for the same dollars, and I wonder how that works.
Sometimes it works well, and sometimes it doesn't.
Been there.
And you know what we try? I like to think we're really good partners. We think of the partnership first, and we sort of worry about the money after.
Sure.
You know, it all comes down to people. Some EDs of other groups are really open to really having a real partnership, and others are very secretive, right? So it depends. We'll partner wherever we can. And but the funding can be a challenge. One solution to that is more money, right?
I hope everyone's hearing that who's listening. Amanda, one of the things that has impressed me about EDF, and you mentioned the messy middle, is that you're helping to lead the Dairy Methane Alliance, and I know that can be messy and interesting at the same time. Can you talk about why it was launched and why it's so important and critical right now that methane is sort of elevated?
Yeah, so the Dairy Methane Action Alliance is an alliance of corporate leaders in the food and ag sector, including Danone and Nestle and Starbucks and a whole bunch of others. And the idea is for organizations like EDF and others to provide technical support so they can confront in their supply chain the improvements that can be made to reduce methane emissions. And why is that so important today? It's because most of the warming that we are experiencing today is coming from methane. Solving the methane problem is our near-term solution on climate change. It is a must-do step along the way. It's not the only step, but it is a must-do step. And the food and from agriculture, methane is a big component of the total methane emissions in the world. There's a lot of opportunity with dairy. There's opportunity in other parts of the ag sector. But we feel like if we can work with companies to make progress on this now, it helps set forth the momentum and get some points on the board and meaningfully contribute to reducing climate pollution in our lifetimes right now.
It can happen.
It can happen.
It's like possible. And
It's
like,
very possible.
yeah.
When we started the conversations around this, it's probably about 15 or 18 months ago now, and we launched the Dairy Methane Action Alliance at COP last year. We've had more companies come on. We've had more momentum and more excitement about this, and it's really meeting them where they are, because there's not the solutions are still being developed, right? So there's a lot of on the job thinking and creative development to come up with the plans, and then importantly, the piece that really needs some support and tackling is the financing. How do you ensure that there's money to pay for the adaptations that are going to be necessary in farm practices to ensure better outcomes for the planet?
Thanks for sharing all that. Because you all, and necessarily have to work with the private sector, I wonder what has surprised you the most, what you've learned the most, what has upset you the most. Jeff, my friend.
I would start by saying the willingness. I'm absolutely overjoyed and optimistic because of the outpouring of public companies that are seeking Rodale support at this moment, and many other great organizations.
Yeah.
But they're looking for practical, timely, actionable advice, and that's why Rodale's ability to work on the ground with farmers in supply chains, we can't do that alone. We need other organizations doing the same kind of work, and we need to scale that and accelerate that. But there's a deep willingness right now. I mean, some of the biggest food companies in the world are calling Rodale. We're a 75-year-old organization.
Finally.
That's a very new dynamic. It's like, oh, our time has come. The world has finally caught up to what we've been espousing for seven and a half decades. But that's a sign of where the world is headed.
But now it's just rolling. I
Yeah.
feel like that it took that 75 years to get it all rolling. Amanda.
Well, if you think about the world today, the trust barometer says that people have confidence in companies to lead us through the changes that the world needs. This is the Edelman Trust Barometer. If you follow this, companies it's important that they step up. It's important that they recognize what they can contribute on climate change in the context of food. But it's not just that we want them to understand this. At this point, it's in their economic business interest.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, climate is creating shocks in the system that they know that they have to solve for. And so there is a big opportunity at hand, and we hope they call all of our partners and friends in the community to ask for help, because it is a monumental, untested challenge. We're still writing the playbook as we go, but this is the moment it's going to happen. And if we do more of this collaborating, it's going to really make an impact.
Absolutely. John.
And I'd agree with what's been said. The willingness of companies is there. It's in their enlightened self-interest. There's nothing wrong with that. It's momentum. It's building. It's great. One of my potential concerns is that some of these companies, even if they're approaching it for the right reasons, they don't have the history in the space. They don't understand the details necessarily.
Right.
I mean, of the three organizations you have up here, we've all been in this space a long time.
Right.
We've done things well. We've done some things poorly, right? But we have those experiences. So the only downside I have is sometimes there's some really well-intentioned but somewhat misinformed folks out there in the corporate world. But we're here as partners to help you.
Well, I want to stay on that theme for a minute because Secretary Kerry was so good at bringing this up this morning. When our political systems change, companies also sort of follow that flow. And I'm frightened, honestly, that the companies who have had this enlightened self-interest are now just going, if things don't go the way many of us think they should and will, that those companies will get off track again. Do you have thoughts on that?
I do. Actually, Rodale, not only do we put ecological science to bear, comparing the systems, but we also put economic data to bear. And so what we're proving out through our long-term research is that regenerative organic agriculture is really good for the bottom line. And so it's not, in our experience, these are not politically motivated decisions. These are economically motivated decisions. And by the way, I would also say that Rodale has seen bipartisan support for our work.
Yeah.
Both sides of
You
the
all
aisle
have, yeah.
are sitting in the front row at our events, and they're all ears because they see that this is just a good way for the world to move.
Yeah, Amanda, you're seeing bipartisan support in so many of these things, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's the path forward. And I think in a lot of potential outcomes in this U.S. election coming up, there's likely to be a split government.
Yeah.
And so bipartisanship may be back in play again and be a real thing.
Yeah. John, any other thoughts?
Well, I just reinforce that, and EDF and we've always worked in that middle space.
Yep.
That's where you can sometimes get things done. It's good to have players who are in that space. I agree that most of the fundamental issues, support for conservation programs in the Farm Bill, they're going to remain having bipartisan support. But I think there were things on the edges. We're already seeing some of that. For instance, a couple of companies, I won't name names, have really backed away from DIJ commitments in agriculture. Right. That is a political thing. So simultaneously, we have the foundational underpinnings of regenerative practices and farmland protection for which there will be support. But at the same time, we have increasingly seen some agricultural issues that were never particularly polarizing or politicized getting politicized.
Yeah. I want this last question to also focus on a call to action because I'm never going to get you all three on stage again. I have such an opportunity here. So Jeff, what's your call to action for this audience, for the world?
Yeah, to invest in organizations that are represented here and others like it that are on the front lines. As I mentioned at the outset, there is a gap in knowledge and technical assistance and science, and it's the land grants are not rushing into this space to the same degree that orgs like this are. So we need support, we need capacity, we need philanthropy, frankly, to do what we do.
Yeah, Amanda?
Yeah, so I love that answer. Thank you. And the U.S. did not pass a farm bill yet. We didn't really talk about that.
Right.
At some point, there needs to be a farm bill. And so my call to action is for you all to call your members of Congress and say, we need a good farm bill that's going to do the things that the community needs, invest in the future, help farmers through the transition to climate smart practices and other improvements, and make your voice heard.
Right on. Thank you.
Indeed.
John, you get the last word, my friend.
Can't disagree with either of those points, but I have to add something. I really think, and Jeff in some ways alluded to it, there is a dearth of research in some of the areas that we really need around specific practices, but mostly because so much academic work is siloed on thinking about this as a system, as our three organizations do.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that's going to come from the standard funding sources that are out there.
Yeah.
So if it's companies, if it's individuals, let's step up and look at the bigger system and some of the research challenges there.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. Please give them a round of applause. Amazing conversation. Thank you all. Thank you.